Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. No matter what time of the day you're listening to us, this is your favorite hour or so of the week. Yes, folks, this is Wednesday Drive Live. And I know some of you are out there driving today, this morning, and that's an exciting feeling. So if you're listening and driving, we want you to have an incredible, productive day. For the rest of you, just sit back, buckle up, both hands inside of the car. We're going to have a wonderful time. I am your host, as always, Peter Jeffrey, coming to you from the palatial studios at Holly Grove Church in Brighton, Tennessee. And I am excited in one way not to be introducing my co-host, Jonathan Fortenberry, because I'm a little jealous. He's up in the Smoky Mountains this week. But I am excited to introduce to you my guest co-host. This is an incredible friend of mine. We have been knowing each other for a long, long time, and we have sung together, preached together. We have taken classes together. We have just spent a whole lot of time, logged a lot of miles and a lot of hours. This is the Right Reverend Dr. Perryn Rice, and he is
Right Reverend.
Supposed to the wrong Reverend. You don't want to be there. And, he has graciously agreed to join us. He lives in Dallas, Texas, but he has lived all over the place, and he's done some incredible things. He spoke so much wisdom into my life, and I just cherish him as a friend. I cherish his wife and his two kids, and we just had, over the years, a lot of fun together. How are you today, Brother Perryn?
I'm doing well, Peter. Good to see you, man. And thanks for allowing me to come on today. Been looking forward to this for a little while.
Absolutely. Me too. So how are things down in Texas? Is everybody treating you okay and the weather's okay and all that?
Yes, it's hot. We're in the 90s now, and that will continue to increase until we get to the triple digits. And then it's just going to be really, really rough. Probably it'll be our fortune that when we get to triple digits that everybody will want to be outside. Everybody's going to want to go to stuff.
That's right.
And you just be drenched wherever you go.
Don't they say it's a dry heat down there?
No, it's a heavy humidity.
Okay.
Now it's funny. The humidity in Tennessee, I think, is worse when it gets to when it's really, really hot, especially up in the mountains and in the hills. And they will probably look at what's here in Texas as a dry heat. But here in Texas, if you go out further west into Nevada, yeah, that's some.
I was in
12.
I was in Arizona, and it was 107 that day, and they said, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's a dry heat." And it's like 107 is 107. I don't care.
Yeah,
that's just unbearable. I don't know.
Yeah, you're still walking around squinting. You know, it's like, oh, it's so hot.
So wow,
So
what have you been up to these days? What's some things that have been going on in your life?
Well, one of the most exciting things that are happening right now is my son Jonathan is graduating from high school. He's a part of the class of 2020 and all the challenges that they have had to go through because of this pandemic. Probably will be the strongest class that we've ever seen in modern history. I mean, they were born in the shadow of 9/11. Yeah. And then you've got this, when they graduate. So an incredibly powerful group of young people. So we're excited about that. He is planning on going to the University of Tulsa. And if all goes well, he will start there in the fall. So this is good. And my daughter is getting ready to go into high school, of which she's been waiting to get into high school for at least 7-8 years or something.
He was 5
along the line. So yes, and my wife Terry as well. So everybody's doing good right now.
My daughter Kaylee graduated from high school too.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with exactly what you said. It is they're going to be a strong bunch of young people coming out of there. And now, see, one of the exciting things in my life in the last week is I finally got my COVID haircut, and I noticed you didn't really have to worry about that at all.
No, I've had a COVID haircut for probably 20 years.
Well prepared for this situation, exactly. I had so much slime in my hair. I looked like a TV preacher. I really did. I was looking like Jimmy Swaggart or something like that.
All you need is that one little bead of sweat coming right down the middle and just keeping shaking your head, brother, while you're talking to the people on television. Let them know that this is the time, this is the season.
You might have missed your calling, man.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, this is a special treat. We're going to do a couple of the segments that we usually do that people love and that I love, and then we're going to get into some really, really good content. But we always do a national day of, so we always spotlight, and because it always is interesting to me how something is worthy enough to get a whole day named after it, and I don't know exactly what you have to do, but there's some pretty bad national days of, for instance, yesterday was National Go Barefoot Day, and I don't know about that.
That's a Flintstone holiday.
Yeah, there it is. And then you have tomorrow is National Repeat Day. It's like, why would you want to do that?
Oh, that's a holiday for all parents.
Yeah,
we've been celebrating that holiday for years now.
It's like Groundhog Day, the movie, But I do have one exciting one. Today is National Rocky Road Day. Are you a fan of the Rocky Road?
It is not my favorite ice cream, but in life I've been on many rocky roads. So which one is it? Is it terrain, or is it ice cream, or is it dessert?
I don't really. I'm assuming it's the dessert, but I'm feeling you identifying with your thing there. Rocky Road's not my favorite ice cream either. I mean, any ice cream is good.
Yes.
I mean, just the words.
Except for lima bean.
Well, I never had that.
I haven't either, but that's my least favorite vegetable in the world. Lima bean ice cream would not be good.
Not fly in your house. Okay.
No.
All right.
No.
Some things you just cannot make taste good. So the idea today is to go out and get you some Rocky Road ice cream and enjoy it. I guess it's just that simple. But then this one is, this is one where kind of the heavens open and the angels sing, and tomorrow is National Cheese Day.
Ooh.
Now I want to know. First of all, I'm assuming you're a fan of cheese.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Do you know anyone in your world that does not like cheese?
I do not.
I
know some who can't have any, and they are very, very bitter people. I don't know many people.
I don't know anybody that doesn't like cheese either. And I just feel like, if you put cheese on just about anything, it makes it better. Now, I don't know about lima beans. I don't know if cheese could even help lima beans, but probably not.
Had to be a lot of it.
Yeah, a lot of it. Yeah. But I also feel like, when you make the cheese dip, that cheese dip can improve almost anything.
I agree. Put cheese on your bills and see how easier it is going to be to pay them. I mean, cheese is just...
I like that. Yeah.
It's amazing. Put it on a flat tire and see how far you'll be able to go.
That's exactly right.
Put some cheese on it.
Are you a yellow cheese guy, a white cheese guy, a stinky cheese guy? What? All of the above? None of the above? What is it?
I don't like stinky cheeses, but I can do white and yellow. My favorite cheese is pepper jack.
I'm with you, man. I knew there was something.
The only downside with pepper jack cheese is if you have to use a lot of it on a hamburger because it melts so quickly.
It does, and it'll melt so quick that you can't hardly even taste that it's there.
Yes, and then you're upset because you go through the trouble of having it. Your mouth is anticipating it, and then you see it, but you just don't taste it. So that's the only downside with pepper jack cheese. I
completely agree with that, and I didn't know there was anybody else in the world that noticed that except myself all these years. But one of the things that I love sometimes those parties that you go to where they put out the cheese and the cracker and the salami and all that stuff. I love it when they have those big, huge chunks of pepper jack cheese on there.
Okay. Let me tell you. When I was working on my doctorate down at Austin Seminary, they have at the beginning of each term they have a wine and cheese reception.
Okay.
And you talking about these are it's Texas and it's Austin, Texas, and they're intentional. I mean, these are some huge cubes of cheese, and pepper jack is always one. Kobe is another. You have Swiss, of course. You have sharp cheddar, and I'm forgetting Gouda. Gouda's not in cubes. They've got Gouda slices. But it is wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful. So I agree. That will improve your party. Folks, I'm just letting you know, if you keep doing the same boring Christmas parties, birthday parties, get you some pepper jack cubes. See what happens.
And if you want to improve your social calendar as the person that always gets invited. And it'll take care of itself. I promise.
You need more followers on Instagram? Get some pepper jack cubes.
Pepper jack cubes. Right. One of the reasons that I wanted to bring you on today, and we planned this literally, I don't know, hours ago. But the whole world knows about the situations that have been going on. We get the COVID. And then all of a sudden comes these events that have popped up that have just been horrific. George Floyd being one of them, and the most prominent one for sure, absolutely. And it is in the news everywhere. Most everybody has seen the video. We now have peaceful and some not so peaceful protests going on. We have had actually, by comparison, a very peaceful protest scene in Memphis, which I think is a credit to the city of Memphis, because we haven't always been the most peaceful people, but we have been lately. And so I wanted to, first of all, I just really felt like we as a church, as Holly Grove Church, we kind of have to decide what kind of church and what kind of ministry we want to do. And there are times when it's best to keep silent. I know you know the old quote, better to keep silent and be thought a fool than open your mouth and remove all doubt. We certainly don't want to do that. And we don't, we're not an activist church. But when something like this comes along, I feel like we need to say something to figure out who we need to be in the midst of this situation. And you are one of the most amazing people. I think you are the perfect people to speak to us, to our church, and to our county, and to our community, and those that are listening, because you have been in so many different situations, and we'll talk about those in just a minute. But you have lived and worked and moved in predominantly Black areas, predominantly white arenas, everything in between. And you are a student of psychology and unity and race relations. And you have you are one of the most thoughtful, intentional people that I know. And so I just kind of give me your take on, we think we know what we're seeing, but what are we really seeing here? Why has this been sort of the straw that broke the camel's back? And how should we kind of process this before we decide how to act?
Sure. A challenge that we're dealing with, or let's name the first demon, which is systemic racism.
Right.
And this basically means there is a system in place that is designed to keep a particular people subjugated, allowing them to only be able to do so much at some times, if you will. And when you say systemic and dealing with the system, it's everywhere. It's legislated. It's carried out in churches. It's carried out in retail. It's carried out in entertainment and in sports in particular. You see it everywhere. Just a quick example. The NFL had a history at one while believing that a black man was just not intelligent enough to play quarterback. Then you got Doug Williams, who wins a Super Bowl as a black quarterback in the NFL with the Washington Redskins. Then it was believed that, well, okay, we can have black quarterbacks, but we can't have black coaches because the coach is the brain trust of the team. We can't have black coaches. And then you get some black coaches, including, I forget the Super Bowl, but it was between Indianapolis Colts and Chicago Bears, where you had Tony Dungy as the head coach for Indianapolis, and you had Lovie Smith as the head coach for Chicago. Super Bowl, the coaches for both Super Bowl teams were black. The statement being made now is ownership. It's ownership, and of course I live in Dallas. I've been a Cowboys fan for a long time, and we got our challenges.
I'll pray for
you here. Yeah, we got our challenges. But one of the things that is we're seeing now, and not just in football, but in quite a few places. For years, we didn't know who the owners of the teams were.
Right.
They were never in the media.
No, you didn't much even care who it was.
You didn't know who they were, and it didn't matter. But in this particular day and age, your owners are celebrities. So there is a sense now that, yeah, we can have black quarterbacks because they're really not in charge of the team. Yeah, we can have black coaches because they're really not in charge of the team either. It's the owners that hold press conferences and have radio shows and do all of these other particulars. And there is a very hard line to cross when it comes to ownership in the NFL. And we've had some prominent people try, Steph Curry being among the last, who tried to buy the Carolina Panthers not too long ago. So we've had some prominent individuals try to move into that area of ownership, and even general manager. The same goes there. So we've had some individuals make that attempt, but it just has not occurred. It has not happened. So when you start talking about systemic racism, you see it everywhere. And unfortunately, many of us, black and brown people, as well as white people, we've grown up with systemic racism. And some of us have been numb to it. This is life. This is what I've always known. So this is what I accept. Until recently, for some of us, death is not a respecter of persons, but killings can be. Killings can be intentional. Murder can be intentional. Anybody can die of old age. Anybody who crosses the street during rush hour can get hit by a car and lose their life. But what we're seeing right now is very, very different. And it's hard to shake. It's hard to look at this and say it's incidental.
No, I completely agree with that. And to me, I mean, when you say the word systemic racism, especially from, that word those two words kind of scare some people. They're going,
sure,
wait a second, I didn't do anything. Wait a second, I'm not responsible for any of that. It's not what we're not even talking about individuals. We're talking about a system that exists, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. It's similar to different dynamic, but similar to what people talk about when they talk about the glass ceiling, where it's impossible for women to break through the glass ceiling into things like CEO, owner of large Fortune 500 companies, things like that. It's not that, I mean, I can sit here and say, no, I've never had a bias toward women being successful or anything, but the system does. And so So if I'm hearing you correctly, this whole this George Floyd situation is, well, it's sort of exposed that system in a way that perhaps we haven't seen before. And this is the first time I've seen in my lifetime where it actually has, in some odd sort of way, united the Black and the white community. And at least we can agree that that was not a good thing. That was
Well, yeah, and this is interesting, and it's a struggle. I heard Spike Lee after Barack Obama was elected president. I heard Spike Lee make a statement similar, something like, "Now I don't know how I'm going to make movies because all of my movies have been about the establishment and the establishment not allowing Black people to do certain things. And now we've got a Black president, so how am I gonna? I'm gonna make movies." Now, he said it tongue in cheek. He was joking in that regard. But there is a dynamic that has happened in our society that I think we've not fully acknowledged, and that is with our younger generations. Unlike before, including my own generation, our generation rather, Peter, it's not. We were the generation that was supposed to change everything.
I know. We didn't do a good enough job, I don't think. But
Well, I can tell you what happened is we just fell into the regular patterns of things
we did.
that had been established before us. But this particular group of young people have already ignored the pattern.
That's right. They have.
They've ignored it, and they're doing things. Well, for instance, just imagine had COVID-19 come along when we were teenagers. And we had to stay in the house and we couldn't see our friends, and we would have lost it.
Oh, absolutely.
We would have lost it. But this particular generation, they don't like being cooped up. I don't want to say that. But because they have mastered everything online.
Yep.
I mean, everything.
Yep.
And early in life, they mastered it.
Yep.
While we were taking classes, computer classes, trying to understand programming and coding, I mean, stuff like that. I mean, these are things that they have inhaled and they exhale effortlessly.
Yeah.
So their community was shifted, but it was never disrupted.
It was never. You are exactly right. My two girls have, in fact, my youngest, Kaylee, is really just having a great time. She's doing all the stuff she wants to do. It's not a big deal. And now that we're able to get out and about a little bit, that's perfectly fine with her. But I will say also that because they are so connected, they are more globally connected as well. And they have a lot larger perspective on things than we did. You know, we had if we wanted to connect with our friends, we had to pick up that phone hanging in the hallway and dial the little thing. So we could,
Rotary.
and when Dad
That long cord.
he would say, "Get off the phone," you know. And so it is a much more global perspective, and this is there's some sense that I feel like, okay, well, we have to get our reaction right, honestly, to support our children and children.
Well, true, and they're if we pay attention, they're actually leading us in this effort.
Absolutely, they
because they have found a common ground racially.
Yes.
Many of them have.
Mm-hmm.
So that it doesn't matter what race their friends are from. They're their friends.
That's true.
You know, there's no big deal. It's
but by and large, you're exactly right.
Interracial dating for them is dating.
Right.
It's dating.
It doesn't make any difference.
It does not make a bit of difference. Now, when I was growing up, it did.
Absolutely.
You know, and it was called interracial dating. And people would say, you know, your mama would say something, your daddy would say something like, you're kind of stretching it out there, aren't you, son? You're kind of really trying to test the waters there, aren't you? You know, so you had all of that kind of stuff that would happen. But today, so when they see a killing like we saw with George Floyd.
And we did.
They immediately identify with Floyd.
Yes.
And they can look at the police officers and feel disdain, and hatred and anger towards them. And they may not even make the connection of the police officers being white initially, as much as it is an absolute atrocity and injustice to this person. Now, they are not oblivious to racism.
Right.
And sometimes our generation and the generations older than we are look at the younger generations with what we've just said and say, yeah, they don't know anything about racism. That's no big deal to them. No, they're not oblivious to it. They are aware of it. They may not have the experiences with it that we have had, and praise God for that. But they are aware of it, and they know when a person hates another person because of their skin color or their sexual orientation or their gender. They recognize that. They know what that is, and they know how evil and how wrong that is.
The thing about that too is they may not, they may have an orthodox, biblical view of, the whole gender issue and all that kind of thing, but they still don't want anybody hating on somebody.
No, they view the sanctity of life.
Yes,
they see it.
Way to put it.
And they that's what they're living. So when it comes, this is the Stan Lee effect to a degree again. We're looking at the younger generation and saying, we're gonna need y'all to fix this.
And honestly, as all over the map as they seem to be sometimes, I think there are some things that they are, sort of leading us through as far as major cultural shifts and major perspective shifts and paradigm shifts.
Societal relationships, they have down.
Yeah.
They've got it. Now, as parents, we look at some other things where you're not saving your money, and what's this outfit you got on? You can't go out the house looking like that.
Yeah.
But as far as their relationships, true relationships, they have a very succinct understanding that works, and whether or not they'll ever acknowledge that it's grounded biblically, that it's rooted in Christianity. They may not ever say that. They may not even recognize that initially, but they seem to have it. When Jesus said, a new mandate I give to you, that you are to love each other as I've loved you. They understand that they're living that out. Let me put it that way, that they're living out. So when a person is abused, they feel the pain
on a different level than we used to when we were.
The empathy is amazing, and it's quick. It's quick. It doesn't take long. It's quick. And I will say this, they also know a fake. They also know a phony.
Absolutely.
Somebody who pretends to be a lover of all people and is not, they pick up on that quickly.
Yeah.
So that's.
Yes. And there's two things that I'll mention about that, and then I want to talk about some of your personal experiences. But one thing is, they dislike the violence that's going on right now, as I do, and I know you do as well. We may understand it, we may know where it comes from, but they're not all about that. And they're also, like you said, with authenticity, somebody who just jumps on social media or something and makes this big, emotional statement about, oh, I'm going to stand with you, I'm going to fight with you. They know that person's never going to post about that again. They just did it to make themselves feel good. And they can speak that a mile away. I know, because both of my daughters have. And I would tend to agree with that.
Oh, Peter, before we move on, let me say this, because I think I jumped past one of your questions and moved to the younger generation. I think your question, one of the things you asked was, why is it so tense right now, or why is this the incident that sort of broke the camel? Okay, for starters, I don't think that this is a single solitary incident. I think what we're dealing with is a string of them. And realistically, just in modern day, this particular age, you're looking at Breonna Taylor, you're looking at Ahmaud Arbery, and now you're looking at George Floyd. So within a month, you're looking at 3 killings. Okay, by individuals perceived, 2 killings by police authorities, and then another one by a couple of guys who thought they were in authority.
That's right. That's right.
So you're looking at that, and it's a lot to process. And I think what we're looking at, or what we're experiencing as a nation, even with the COVID-19 backdrop, is that this is just too much. We've hit a breaking point, and we're seeing this everywhere. Now, I can liken it to some other movements that we've seen that just broke out, that I think were also valid. But this right here, people have had enough. It's almost like the Mike Brown shooting in St. Louis. I forgot the name of the town right outside of St. Louis, where they have a history of racial tension between the community and the police. It's a history of it, and this young man gets killed. Now, of course, there are a lot of surrounding stories about that particular death that we can definitely dive into. But nevertheless, he is killed, and the community just snapped. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. Also, and it's also this too, Peter, dealing with the younger generations, and I don't mean to jump all over the place, but also dealing with literally with interracial relationships that we have right now. More and more people are seeing themselves as George Floyd, or someone they love as George Floyd, and it is nerve-wracking.
Yes, and that is a perfect segue into a couple of things I want to talk about now. You have a lot of experience, and you know what you're talking about when it comes to these kinds of things. I mean, your dad, Joel Rice, was the first Black student at Bethel College at the time in McKenzie, Tennessee. And I've heard him talk about that a little bit. I know you've heard him talk a lot about it. And then you have ministered in a very just a diverse set of circumstances and environments. Your ordination is recognized by 3 denominations, by the Cumberland Presbyterian Church, the Cumberland Presbyterian Church in America, which is ironically enough the African American style Cumberland Presbyterian. 2 separate denominations, sister denominations. We've been trying to get them together for a long time, and
I'm still trying.
Right. And then also the Presbyterian Church USA. Lake Highlands is a union church. It is Cumberland Presbyterian and PCUSA. But before then, you had a faith church, right? Presbyterian Church in America, right there near Dallas, and that was. Would you say that was pretty much all African American congregation?
Oh yeah. It's Black church.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And then before that was East Waco, down in Waco, Texas, also.
Yeah, I
Black
didn't.
Church.
East
Waco was the first church I pastored.
Okay.
And wonderful folks down there. But yeah, you know Faith well. I think Faith was the first CPCA congregation that you brought Renaissance to.
Ever. And I don't know how the kids did. I had a blast, man.
We had a ball too. It was a wonderful occasion. And matter of fact, one of my dear friends, who's our session clerk here at Lake Highlands, brought her son, Brian Heil, to the church. And Brian was one of my kids when I was the youth minister at Lake Park Cumberland Presbyterian Church and at Lake Highlands. This is my second time, folks, with Lake Highlands. My first time was as a youth director and associate minister of sorts.
I did Brian Heil's wedding, by the way.
Did you?
I did, up in Minnesota. I had to go all the way to Minnesota to do it.
Was it? See, that was during the spring, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like.
Okay, got thoughts. Yeah.
Okay, but then you did kind of a, one of those, nobody saw it coming kind of moves. And you went up to be the associate pastor at the Cookeville Cumberland Presbyterian Church. I mean, Cookeville is a college town, but the whole Cumberland Plateau is not known for its racial diversity or anything. So
No.
from an all-black environment to a mostly white, if not all white, church, and you just, tell me about that whole transition and how.
Sure. And there's a lot that goes into this. One, of course, I believe that the Lord wanted us to be in Cookeville for a time, for a season. I never really saw myself as ever being the senior pastor there at Cookeville. I was supposed to be the associate pastor, and I enjoyed being the associate pastor. I love working with Charles McCaskey and the wonderful folks there at First Cumberland in Cookeville. But yeah, it came as a shock to many individuals that move would happen.
I was just excited to have you a lot closer to me. So
yeah, and that was fun. That's for certain. We were able to do so much together. But Cookeville, when we moved to Cookeville, the African American population was 2.9% in Cookeville. And we knew that there would be some challenges there. We knew that was going to happen. To our understanding, we had one member of the Cookeville Cumberland Presbyterian Church, one person leave the church because they did not want me there as the associate pastor, which is okay. I had the same thing happen when I came to Lake Highlands. I had one person leave because he didn't want to have a black pastor. So it's one of those types of things. I'm like, yeah, you're missing out because we're wonderful. We're wonderful. but anyway, so it was different. Now, in all fairness, I had preached 3 or 4 revivals in Cookeville before coming to Cookeville. Charles McCaskey and my father are friends. They were both students at Bethel at the same time. If I can tell this story, yes, my father integrated Bethel, and it was not an easy move in 1961. Charles McCaskey had been expelled from Bethel for whatever reason. I have no idea what it was.
Wow.
But my father and Charles knew each other before Bethel. Both of them. Charles is from Oklahoma, as you know. He loves Boomer Sooner. He loves it. My father served as an apprentice of sorts, if you will, or as an intern with the late Reverend S.A. Nelson in Muskogee, Oklahoma. So he and Charles knew each other. Gotcha. So when it came time for my father to be a student at Bethel, they couldn't find anybody to room with him.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to room with Pop. And so they called Charles, who had been expelled. And they said, look, we'll let you back in.
On one condition.
If you'll room with Joel Rice. Oh, and Charles said, I know Joel. He's a friend of mine. That's no problem. Yeah, he can room with me and we're good. So they set it up for Pop to room with Charles. But Pop had found a family in town that he was going to stay with instead. So he ended up staying with them, and it was too late. They couldn't kick Charles out. They let him back in. So
got free. And that's
but yeah, you're correct. My brother and I both, we were born into this life.
Yeah.
This is what we know. Racial reconciliatory practices, the beauty of it. We also know the ugly side to it. I've never seen ugly like Pop saw ugly in my life. I've never seen it the way that he did. But it is a challenge. And in Cookeville, by and large, most of that town received us with open arms.
Yeah.
But there were some challenges that were there. And we ran into those.
And I know that you, I know that you dealt with those challenges to a greater degree as a child and as a teenager and all these kinds of things. One of the things that is surfacing, and I think, and it's good that it is. It's kind of been, maybe we should have known about this a long time ago, but the general public is just now really becoming aware of the fact that dads and moms have to give, especially their sons, the talk.
Mhm.
Have you had to give Jonathan the talk?
Oh yeah, and Lauren. And they'll get it again before this year begins, especially with his going off to college. It will happen again, and it's difficult. Um, my wife and I both were raised in a part of Dallas called Oak Cliff, which can be considered the hood.
Yeah.
And we love the hood. I love going back to the old neighborhoods and seeing some old friends and places that we would frequent. My favorite thing about New York is Harlem.
Yeah.
I enjoy those areas. But when you are raising your children and you're not raising them in those areas, um, there's a lot of other extra lessons that have to be taught. So if you're raised in the rural area, the urban areas of a city, of a metropolis, if you will, metropolitan area, I'm sorry. If you're raised in those urban sectors, you pick up on some stuff quickly.
Yeah.
You know what it means when helicopters are flying around, and that's when you go in the house.
Right.
You know those things. You can hear the engines, and when there's racing in the street,
Mm-hmm.
which will oftentimes be followed by police chases.
Yeah.
And literal chases. You know these things. We didn't hear a lot of gunfire growing up. Some of my friends have,
Yeah.
but we didn't. But you do know the sound of one.
Right.
You, to a degree, you can tell the difference between a gunfire and a car backfiring.
Yeah.
They don't exactly sound the same. So you pick up on those things, and you also pick up on how you handle yourself when it comes to law enforcement.
Right.
And this does not have to be racial from the standpoint of black and white, or white and other. This is just general, how you handle yourself with law enforcement. Because a lot of times in your urban areas, the patrol is people who look like you.
Right.
That's who they send into those areas. So you learn how to handle yourself, how to conduct yourself. And then you learn how to conduct yourself if the officer is white. You pick up a lot of stuff you pick up early. But now that many African Americans in this country have moved into the upper middle class area, if you will, and have made their way into suburbia and places along this line, their children are not being raised with that sixth sense, if you will.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of talking.
Right.
That's going on, and a lot of times it's the conversations that your children don't understand.
And so you picked up on a lot of this stuff just by instinct when you were a kid, but now you're finding you have to make your children and other people have to make their children more aware of these things.
This is going to be a very cruel illustration, but it's very poignant. It's like taking a lion that's raised in a zoo and dropping that lion in the jungle or in the Serengeti.
Gotcha.
And expecting that lion to know what to do out there. In the zoo, that lion's been fed 3 times a day, gets bathed, of course, gets gawked at and everything, but many times that lion's nails are filed down.
Yeah.
All of these things happen in the zoo, but not in the wild.
Right.
And so it's one of those conversations that are being had. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but in many white households, the conversation is being had with their children as well. And I'm not talking about something demeaning. It's just a matter of if you're going to be a friend, be a friend.
Right.
And make sure that you are a friend to your friends, especially if they are in trouble. be there for them, and help them. This whole understanding of white privilege is real. We don't need to act like it's not. Um, there are other privileges that exist too, and we don't need to act like those aren't true as well.
That's right.
I have a very good friend named Sarah Chung, who I think she's still one of the admissions director at Princeton, who came to Lake Highlands a few years ago and did a workshop on privilege and proved that all of us have a certain level of privilege. But anyway, I digress slightly. I'm sorry.
Good. That's good. I love it.
But white privilege is real, and it can be a blessing or it can be a curse.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on how it is used. And then when you're white and you come to grips with understanding that we live under a systemic racist system ceiling, when you understand that, then you're able to see, okay, I can use this privilege to lift up my friends, especially my friends of color or people of color. I can be that voice.
That's exactly right. And you and I were talking about this last night. Now, first of all, I want to make sure that we're clear here, because, we are not, you're not, I'm not throwing a blanket over law enforcement. We're talking about encounters with obviously, anger-driven, racist-driven law enforcement,
ultra aggressive,
and especially in metropolitan areas, every force has their percentage of them. And so these are, we have some, I know you have some in your church, and we have some in ours that are some of the best law enforcement people that I've ever come in contact with. And I've heard them speak on this as well. And they would agree with you and me. We have a sheriff here. His name is Pancho. And Pancho is one of the greatest guys. I mean, he is an advocate for us and for the church community. And every time we go out and do our food ministry and snack ministry in the neighborhood, we always stop by and make sure Pancho gets something there, because
listen, former Officer Shaven from Minneapolis is in the minority of those type of police officers.
Fortunately.
Mark Furman, to go all the way back,
back in the day,
in the minority of those types of police officers. There are not many. Most police officers are truly trying to do their best to protect and serve, and are giving their lives on a daily basis. Goodness gracious, the domestic violence matters that they have to go into blindly so often. So they are really doing their best to keep us safe. It's a handful. It's just a handful.
Boy, those handful can do so much damage.
And it's the old adage of the barking dog. That's the one that you pay attention to.
That's exactly right.
Because he demands your attention because he's barking all the time. Right. So you got a handful, and these are the ones that are doing the most damage, and they're doing it at an astronomical rate. And again, under this systemic system, judgment, punishment, it just does not come.
That's right.
It doesn't come.
It has not until we've seen some not quick enough, but fairly quick movement on a couple of these super awful, unjust situations recently. That is a good thing, but part of that is they're just forced into it because now we live in the video age where everybody can, it doesn't happen behind closed doors anymore either. But going back to that privilege thing, one of the things that I sort of realized early on, I guess instinctively, because we weren't using those terms 15 years ago, is that I just, as you know, I was, the leader of a number of young people, 350 or so, and it was a performing arts program and everything. And we had all over the map. We had kids from Asia and from the hood and people from South America and Japan. There's all this diversity there, and I I understood, I guess, just like we were talking about last night, that I came to the realization, that I've had a hard life. I don't consider myself a privileged person by any stretch of the imagination. I do know what it's like to not know where your supper is going to come from. But when it comes to me moving about in the world and applying myself and working hard and trying to become successful, I had to acknowledge that, doors opened easier for me than it did for some of these kids, than it does for some of these kids. And I saw how they were intelligent, hardworking, talented, super talented young people. But I would go home and my heart would ache sometimes, because I thought, how do we get these young people from here to where they really want to be? And so it was kind of at that point I thought, okay, well, I have the ability to influence them and to lead them through a time period to where they will be able to open some of their own doors. And that this sort of hopelessness, like there's going to be a chance for somebody, but not for me. We could take some of that away. And of course, that's where Jesus came in as well, because Jesus gives us the miraculous power to do more than we ever thought possible. And I used to preach it every time. In fact, I used to give this talk a lot at a lot of our concerts. I would stop and preach for a little while, and I'd always talk about exceeding abundantly beyond. We even put it on a T-shirt. And we were in San Antonio, Texas, and one of the kids made me a T-shirt that said exceeding abundantly beyond. But I used to go to, all we can ask or imagine. That's what it says.
Yeah.
How much can you imagine? And I used to say, you know what? I can imagine 500 Mercedes. I can imagine that. God's power and what God desires to do for us is more than 500 Mercedes sitting in the parking lot. How do we, and so we used to just preach that over and over and over again. And then, every chance that I would get, I would put them in situations where they would be noticed and they could excel and they could succeed. And that's really kind of what we're talking about in some way. Don't you think? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Oh yeah. And I think that's the responsibility that we possess. Now, this is a responsibility that we all have.
Yes, we do.
But when you recognize the big evil that exists and how it's hurting people, how it has deliberately been put into place to make sure some people will never reach their God-given potential. Yeah. When you see that is there, you got a responsibility to speak out against that and to fight against it. And that's what needs to occur. If you look at scripture, Jesus spends a lot of time doing this with various persons along the way. The woman who has a bent over back, and he heals her on the Sabbath. Those who were there didn't even see her, didn't even pay attention to her until he calls her forward and he heals her. And then they get mad that he's done this. The woman that was caught in adultery.
Yes.
The man by the pool of Siloam, blind Bartimaeus. You got all of these individuals that society ignored, didn't pay attention to, that Jesus saw, and Jesus used what he had to lift them up and also to change the minds of many. One of my favorite is the woman at Jacob's well in John 4. The simple fact that she turns a whole town to Christ, an entire town, a town that probably didn't pay a lick of attention to her whatsoever. And if they did pay attention to her, they probably called her names, saw her in a very poor light. And then Jesus uses her, and she goes back to Sychar and says, come see a man who has told me everything about myself. Could he be the Christ? And then they come and they spend some time with Jesus, and they're like, yeah, he is the Christ. Yeah, he is the one.
That's the whole thing about it too, is Jesus and the woman, first of all, they shouldn't have been talking because it was a man and woman who didn't know each other. The second reason they shouldn't have been talking is because they're of two different nationalities.
Yeah.
And the third reason that he shouldn't have been talking to her is because she had a bad history of relationship problems, which is why she was coming during the heat of the day and not during the cool of the day.
Right.
And so Jesus crosses all those barriers and impacts the whole town. And that's really that was really brings us to our last point here, which is okay. So here we are in Brighton, Tennessee, Tipton County, West Tennessee. We're at Holly Grove Church, one of the greatest churches on the planet. I just really believe that. And so we're hearing all of these things. It was like drinking from a fire hose with all of this with this information and all of this stuff in it, and much of it is designed to make us feel a particular way. You know how news articles and just the shouting voices on social media and everything. I'm going to talk about this this Sunday, how divisions begin, and a lot of it is just, and we're seeing it especially in this COVID-19 quarantine kind of lockdown thing, is social media. Every social media feed has an algorithm. And the algorithm wants you to stay as long as you can on their site so that they can feed you advertisement and they can make a gazillion dollars. So what they do is they feed you stuff that's just like you. They feed you friend recommendations that are just like you, products that align with your lifestyle. They feed you these random, you've seen them many times, recommended for you.
Comic book stuff. I get it all the time.
And so they basically put you in this silo. And so now the only influence you have is people that think and respond just like you do. You get nothing else. And then once they get you in this compartment, then they start screaming at you, So now it's this news article and that news article. And all of this is literally designed to make you angry, because the statistics show you will engage longer, more hours scrolling, the more angry you are. And so they've set you up, and they've slipped you the bait, and we've all bit on it hook, line, and sinker. And so we hear these words and we hear these catchphrases and we see this stuff, and some of it we just don't even want it to be true. And so we just make it not true. And then once we decide which camp we're in, then that social media and that news feed, they just promote that and they pummel us with it. And pretty soon we have this alternative reality that is not reality at all.
Yeah.
And it happens in every corner, in every people group. And then what happens is all the people groups line up on each side of the road and scream at each other. And so opposite of how Jesus modeled for us to live, how Jesus commanded us to live. When he said this is a new commandment, he meant it. You've never heard of this before, because the commandments you've had before are all the rules you're supposed to follow, and you can judge if you're superior to somebody else because you followed more rules correctly than they did. And it's a whole, monetizing system. But now he says, no, I'm giving you a new commandment. It's going to be harder. It's going to be more difficult. It's going to challenge everything. It's going to challenge your upbringing. It's going to challenge your context, your friend groups, your family, everything. But the commandment is to love one another as I have loved you. And then, when Jesus prays for us, that high priestly prayer, what's the main thing that he says in the high priestly prayer? He says it several times. He says that they may be one. Just like I am, that's where we need to go as a church. We don't need to buy into the hype. We don't need to make up our own stories. We don't need to sequester ourselves over in a corner and just not talk about it. We need to get to the place to where we can be love in these situations, especially these times of national alarm and distress.
Yes.
So me, our church pretty well. What's our first step? What's our next step? Where do we go with this?
May I share a story?
Yeah.
To lead to the steps. When I was a young preacher at the Lake Cumberland Presbyterian Church, at that time I was a youth minister. Our pastor was Bob E. Shelton.
Great man.
who is missed. I still see the office that I'm in as his office. That's what I preferred it to be. But he decided it was time for me to start preaching. Now, Lake Park, at that time, Lake Park, Cumberland had no black people at all. And I was content with not preaching. I was a young seminarian. I was fine. But he said, Perryn, it's time for you to start preaching. And I said, okay. You tell me when you want me to. And he said, this coming Sunday. So I'm not going to share his name, but we had a member of this church, an old gentleman, that he told me when he was dying this story. He said, Perryn, when Bob said it was time for you to start preaching, I decided I was never going to listen to you. And I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, I don't remember a Sunday when I was preaching that you weren't there. He said, well, I changed, but he said, I was never going to listen to you. He said, the reason why is because all I knew of your people was what I saw on the news.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And it was always, he said, African Americans were always very aggressive and incredibly violent and hostile. And he said the preachers that I saw on television preached as if they were always angry. He said, I just made up my mind I wasn't going to listen to you. Two ladies, Eula Watterson and Wilma Hull, both have joined the church triumphant, but were longtime Cumberland Presbyterians. Found out that he wasn't coming. They went and got him, dragged him out the house, made him show up the first Sunday that I preached. Well, on his deathbed, he told me that he was glad that they did that because he needed to know the truth, that he was not right in his assessment of African Americans. And it was based on what had been fed to him versus what he had experienced. This is the first step that I would give, that I would suggest. Gain an authentic experience working with people different from yourself. Gain that experience. Seek it out, find it, make it happen. Don't allow the media to tell you what your experience is.
That's right.
Don't allow your friends on Facebook or any to tell you what your experience should be. Go find it for yourself, because this is what I believe. This is what I've learned, and I know this to be true. We do have more similarities than we have differences.
Absolutely.
Many more similarities than differences. And once you reach out and meet someone who is not like yourself, you'll find out that they love their family just like you love your family. You'll find out that they love hamburgers like you love hamburgers. You'll find out that they love action movies like you love action movies, or they don't like the theater at all like you don't like the theater at all. You'll find out that they love football, maybe not the team that you love, but they love football like you love football. You'll find out that there are so many more similarities. And in the end, if the person is Christian, you will find out that they love the Lord just like you love the Lord, and that the Lord loves them just like the Lord loves you. You will discover that. But you can't allow an outside group to tell you what you need to feel, what you need to experience. Go do that yourself.
And here's the thing that will happen when you do that. I have experienced this in numerous ways. Too many, I can't even count them. But you not only find out that that people from another culture or another economic context, social context, but especially race, because I got to go all over the world in my travels, and I got to meet people in the Philippines and in Jamaica, and there's all these different kinds of Switzerland, and what you find out is you have all these things in common, but yet when you have a meaningful, authentic engagement with them, then you get all the stuff that you didn't have before. You get to eat new foods, and you get to listen to new music, and you get to find out about, one of the things I always joked about is every culture in the world loves colorful clothing except for people in the U.S. Mexicans, they wear pink and orange together. They don't care. They want it to be bright. The people from, if you look at people in the islands, man, they just wear the color everywhere. U.S. man, it's it's beige. Everything is beige. As as I wear my black T-shirt, right?
And I got a gray one on, so yeah.
But you not only find that common ground, but you gain so much more, and then you get to such a more enriching experience, because then you get to share stuff that they didn't know, and
Yes.
it really is a life changer, a game changer. And so I'm glad that you said that. That is so good. One of my favorite preachers out preaching right now, in fact, I'm probably going to borrow a line or two from his sermon for this Sunday, is Mike Todd from Transformation Church. And he said a line in his sermon that was so brilliant. He said, it begins not with an organization, it begins with an organism.
Yeah, that's good.
And that is,
it's true.
So right. But he said it requires you to get outside your comfort zone on purpose. Trust that God has something in it for you.
Yes. The second probably could even be the first, but if you make it first, it's hard to do. And that is to truly see that every individual has been created in God's image.
That is so
just like you are. Once you come to that conclusion, I find it very hard to hate anyone.
Absolutely.
Because if you do hate them, then you hate the God that's in them.
Absolutely.
Or you hate the God who has created them in God's image. And what self promoting Christian wants to make that statement? Wants to acknowledge that?
No, we've made that statement. We just haven't verbalized it.
Yeah. So that, and
was it Martin Luther King Jr. who said that the most segregated hour during the week is 11 o'clock on Sunday?
Yeah, that was King.
Man, that is just,
see, and part of that is because we treat church like we treat our mamas. Mama's sacred, Daddy. Father's Day rolls around. Oh, is that today? But Mother's Day you plan for, for a month on end. Mama's sacred. Your church is sacred, and you don't want anybody in. Matter of fact, you determine who should be in there more so than anyone else.
Yeah.
And that's it's unfortunate. That's not what the Lord intended, but that's what we have created.
Yeah.
In this westernizing of Christianity.
I've been in a lot of different church situations, and there have been many times when I just really, really felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb, and some of it is a language barrier. I probably stuck out in the Chinese church service that I went to, because I was about all as everybody, and I didn't speak the language, but I could sing some of the songs. At least I could hum along. And so, I get some of that stuff, but I agree. To view somebody differently like that is to say that they have a different God than you do, or no, it's one Lord, one Spirit, one baptism, right?
Yes.
One Father of all.
Yeah. Here at Lake Highlands, well, Peter, you've been here, so we've got a very diverse congregation. We've got people from about 20 different countries. Who are members of Lake Highlands. And to celebrate the diversity, we passed a piece. When we're open, we've been closed because of COVID, but when we're open, at least every other month, we passed a piece in a language other than English.
Love it.
And usually a language that's spoken by someone in the congregation.
Yes.
And this is a reminder that the church is supposed to be global, for one. But secondly, that Jesus Christ died for everyone, regardless as to what language they speak.
Yeah.
And if you can acknowledge that, it does make it difficult, in my opinion, to be racist. Now, let me clarify that and bring us to the third point of dealing with racial reconciliation. You have to understand that you're going to say something dumb.
Oh, that is true.
You're going to say something dumb. You're going to say something that is racist in nature, and you just didn't know.
Exactly.
You're going to do that. what you have to be able to do is trust the person that you're talking to. And listen, you got to listen. If they tell you, okay, that's offensive, don't try to negotiate with them.
And don't get your feelings hurt.
No, and don't get your feelings hurt. So don't try to say, well, that's really not racist. What I say, yeah, if they say it's racist, it is. It is. To them, it is.
Your feelings are your feelings, and I've been on the receiving end and the giving end too many times to not be aware of that, and that is so true. When we went to Japan, first time I was there, I got schooled and everything ahead of time. And there were so many things I forgot, and I didn't realize, and they're so polite, they'll never tell you. But, one time I left a restaurant in a big gathering of church people, a bunch of pastors. And one thing you're not supposed to do in Japan is to leave the fork sticking up in your plate in anything, because that's like a symbol of death.
Mm-hmm.
I did that, and I didn't. And I turned around, I was going to go back and fix it. And one of the pastors just fixed it for me. And it's like, I felt like about 2 inches tall. That was like but that's a perfect example. That was deeply offensive to them. And They understood that I didn't know, I didn't remember. And they were super gracious to me. But I wasn't going to argue with them about it.
Yeah. Well, Peter, I've had many ministers of different nationalities come and preach. At the churches that I've pastored.
Absolutely.
And whether it's been an all-black church or what have you, I've had many come. And the funny thing is, they all have, especially if they don't come from a church that is diverse as Lake Highlands or not of the same race that they are, they all have questions. Can I say this?
Right.
Can I do this? And I tell them all, I said, if it's something that's going to be difficult, I said, no, you can't say that. No, you can't say that. But I said, look, we want you here.
Yeah.
We want you here. We're rooting for you. You may say something. Trust me, we will forgive you, and we're going to move on. And then if it's something that is very difficult, I'll let you know, because I don't want you to do this again. I'll give you an example. And I know we're running out of time. I got stories for days. But when I was a youth minister, I was having a lock-in, and two of my kids, both of them were white. They were wrestling on the ground, on the floor, and the larger one, kept calling the smaller one the N-word.
Oh yeah.
He just he just said it freely. Yeah. The N-word. The first time he said it, I thought I misheard.
Mm-hmm.
So I just didn't ignore it. Then he said it again and again and again. I'm like, no, this kid's really doing this. So I, instead of getting angry and upset, I believe the Spirit talked to me and said, this is a teachable moment. Yes. So I went over and I took both boys and I sat them down. I talked to them and I explained what that word meant. And I said, well, where have you been to hear this word? And this is what the boy told me. He says, I love hip hop.
Oh, wow.
He says, I love rap. And he says, my mother doesn't know, but I get the explicit lyrics.
Yeah, uncensored.
I get the uncensored versions of the songs, and I play them in my headphones. So she doesn't know. Yeah. And this is what they're saying. So I just said what I heard. And then I explained what that word meant, because a part of me said, yeah, this kid's going to die. He's gonna grow up and he's gonna say this to the wrong person.
With the wrong person.
We're gonna be singing in the upper room over his body pretty soon. I said, let me save his life. So I explained it, and at least to my knowledge, he's a young man now, grown, married.
So that's good.
But that's my point. You're going to say something. Yeah. And you don't know that it's wrong.
That's right.
I got another story. Let me give you another one. Okay.
One more. That's good. Come on. Let's
just stop me when. Okay. I was working for the Texas Department of Human Services. I was helping people get food stamps and financial assistance and Medicaid and these particulars.
Uh-huh.
And a young white lady came in with her daughter and her mother. Her mother was older than I was. And all through the interview with the daughter, because the daughter was the one who was applying, the mother looked at me kind of harshly. And finally she said, Mr. Rice, I just have to say this. You are the best looking colored man I have ever seen in my life. Now, I had a couple of options here.
Yeah.
You know, I recognized her age, the time frame from which she had come. Yeah. A high probability that she had not been around many Black people in her life. But I could have been offended. Yeah. And jumped across the table and choked her. You know, or I could have screamed at her, I could have yelled at her. Instead, I recognized and realized that she was paying me a compliment. She used a word that was offensive, but she didn't know it. Now, her daughter knew. Her daughter slid, I don't know how far into her seat. She was scared that I was going to deny her benefits and all this. And I told the lady, I told her mother, I said, thank you. But we don't use the word colored anymore. That's just not a word that we use. It's a difficult word to process. So what we say now is African American or Black. We can say those two, and we're good. And she said, "Oh, okay. I'm sorry." I said, "No, that's all right. You know, this is something that we all gotta learn these things, and we moved on."
Right.
Now, will everyone be that calm and easy? Maybe not. And there are some things that can be said that may even rile me up, like they can someone else. But this is what I'm asking of Holly Grove and anyone else who may be watching. In trying to cultivate these types of relationships, understand that you're going to say something that is going to be difficult. Oh, is your brother from the hood like you?
Yeah.
That can be seen as offensive.
Yeah.
Oh, so you went to one of those Black universities where, like Dr. King.
Yeah.
That can come across as being offensive. So you're going to say something. Yeah. that can happen. I was in Northern Ireland, and the driver, I said, "Wow, everybody over here drives on the wrong side of the street." And the driver looked at me and said, "Well, what side of the street do you drive on?" So you're going to say something. You're going to say something. Be aware of that. Be ready to correct it. So you don't fight them on it. You know, don't pick a fight. Don't try to justify your statement. Don't do that, because it's going to make things worse. Because what you're trying to do is cultivate a wholesome relationship that is going to be a blessing to the body of Christ as well as to you.
That's right.
So just be prepared for that. Okay, Peter, man, I've been hanging out with you since 5 p.m.
I know. This we could make a 5-hour podcast out of this. I promise you, because I feel like we just scratched the surface of this, but this is just about as rich as it gets, and I want to thank you for taking the time out to just share your heart and to share your knowledge and your perspective. I really see this as something. It's an awakening for all of us, really, because we're having to wrestle and deal with things in a whole new way, and it's time. It's time for us to just be honest with ourselves and to be honest with God, and to find that way forward in love and in faith, to be like Jesus told us to be. So thank you for bringing this to us today. We just really appreciate it.
May I have just one closing statement?
Uh-huh.
A lot of times people say, "I don't see color."
Yeah, no.
That's not what the Lord wants.
No.
The Lord wants us to see color and still love.
Yes. The Lord sees color, and he thinks, and it is beautiful to the Lord. The Lord sees gender. The Lord sees personalities that differ. The Lord sees body types and shapes. The Lord sees all of the different facets that make us. And we are, what does it say? We're fearfully and wonderfully made. That means we are made this way on purpose. God knitted us together in our mother's womb, and we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And so you're right. I see color, and I love different colors. Like I said, we all need to wear more color, because we get. But no, you are so right on, and I thank you for this great perspective. This is the great thing about it is we have one agenda. And you and I are totally united on this. We have an agenda to bring people to Jesus, to demonstrate and model the love of Christ to all that are around us, to preach the truth in love, but also to never back up from something that we know is true and something that God has laid on our hearts. So thank you for doing that today. And thank you for putting up with me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I've had a wonderful time.
All right. Well, to all of the listeners out there, we want you to take this and use it. And we're gonna we'll have Perryn back on at another time. Maybe we won't all still be locked down by then. Maybe we'll all be out, freely move around. But we want you to go out today and have an incredible day, a productive day, have a Christ-filled day. And let's take those 3 action steps. And we'll be looking forward to talking this weekend about all the different ways that we divide into different segments and what God has to say about that and what we can do about that, especially in this particular unique time we're living in. So love each and every one of you. Go and have the greatest day ever. Have the greatest night's sleep you ever had. And we will see you next week here on Wednesday Drive Live. God bless you.